I'm your host, Cliff Garner, and today is the wee hours of the 10th of August. And yesterday, everybody was freaking out over North Korea. I don't think they're going to do much of anything. As a matter of fact, I'm not going to worry much at all. I have the feeling that Styx has pretty much predicted it. It seems logical to me to where Trump is probably working out a nice deal between us and South Korea and China, in which we can flatten North Korea's nuclear and Air Force and also their artillery, and let South Korea walk in. And I think he mentioned something about maybe, or somebody did, of maybe having Japan come in with their navy and provide support from the coasts. China probably end up taking that part in the north. It's rich in resources, set up kind of a puppet government there, or maybe just straight annex it maybe. And let Korea reunify the peninsula. I think it'd be worth it to us to back out and sit someplace a little off the coast, maybe Japan or whatever. You know, I think maybe we work something out. I think with China being a little further advanced with the tensions that are going on over there, I'm going to guess the Japanese, even with the nationalism there, are probably willing to let us sit there with our troops to help them just in case China gets a little more aggressive. I think they'd actually like us to be there. Although, you know, that remains to be seen. Could we see a nuclear Japan here in the future? That could be a long-term thing, but I have the feeling that if South Korea were to move into most of the North and occupy it and reunify the country and live happily ever after as one people, I really do have the feeling that the Chinese will insist upon it being denuclearized in Korea, and I think that would cause Japan to say, you know, we don't mind you guys so much after all. So, you know, I see the geopolitics in that area actually firming up in a way that I think that in the long run it'd be a lot more feasible than what has been going on with the neocons and the neo-libs and the warmonger Obama. Your globalists, pretty clueless people, really, and it comes right down to it. I think that upsetting that apple cart needed to be done. And I think a lot more people are going to start seeing it real fast, that Trump is actually a better alternative to what we've been having. So I think that things in the long run are good. Then you got the other side that's freaking out, the conservatives. Here, just a second. Making my ice water here. Got to do that first. Yeah, better. Okay, but I think that well, somebody else besides Styx, I think, was talking about Japan. And I think that's pretty reasonable. Right now we have our Air Force helping the Filipinos going after ISIS and their franchise in the Philippines. Good. Bastards are cutting people's heads off. Well, I don't think that they're going to see a whole lot of mercy. I really don't. And they're definitely not getting a whole lot of sympathy. And I think on the whole, the international scene looks a whole lot better in spite of anything that Obama's little shadow government has to say, and they're patsies in the mainstream press. So I'm not too concerned. Actually, I think people see the truth sooner or later, and they start to get curious. It's like, hey, wait a minute. He hasn't been the warmonger we thought he was. Well, no, he was talking about non-intervention. That's why I ended up eventually going to vote for him. I didn't choose him as my first. I was a libertarian. I'd voted libertarian before. I really wanted to see the libertarians break into the big time. I wanted to put them up there and break the two-party monopoly or duopoly or diopoly, however you want to put it. I think a duopoly. Correct. But in any case, but I wanted to break the two-party hegemony. I think that's been a necessary step in actually making America's government more accountable to its people. That's what I've been calling for years. Even when I was going along with certain things that the neocons and neolibs were saying. But yeah, I've always been for breaking the two-party lock on things. It's not constitutional. It has nothing to do with the Constitution. It's a construct that has been artificially erected and put over us, and it's masked the fact that there's a wide variety of opinions and viewpoints and possibilities that those two parties have blocked off and stifled for years. Time to break it. Bye Dems, and bye Republicans if you're not gonna get with the program. Oh yeah, it's a revolution. So, any rate, I'm gonna do something a little bit different today because I really didn't pay a whole lot of attention to all the fuss and bluster. The whole thing with what is his name, Manafort, I think is a non-starter too. I'll be surprised if they find anything to bust him. I really will. Matter of fact, I think it's going to bounce right back on him. There's other things that are in motion on Mr. Mueller, and I don't know that he is what the right says he is, and at the same time, I also have been watching other forces in action, and it's like, okay, this could be interesting. And he's not the end-all and be-all that the Dems want him to be. I have a feeling they're going to be very disappointed with Mr. Mueller. I really do. Matter of fact, things might be snapping back right about, I don't know, now? Maybe not now, but I know they're going to snap. He's already pressing the right buttons, and they're starting to click. Some things they're not going to be able to control. In fact, there's a lot of them they're not going to be able to control because once things start going, it's going to be chaos. So I actually am going to look at something totally different. I love music of all kinds. I've been a big fan of music. I've played rock. I've played blues. I've played jazz. I've played classical. I've played or sung. I'm a singer mostly. That I've sung in all kinds of things. I had an orchestra behind me once. It was wonderful. I've been a soloist in jazz, so I've done a little of everything, and I love it all. I really enjoyed doing madrigals, and I like Renaissance style music. I can't really say I've heard all that much medieval or ancient, but what I've heard has been good. I don't know that I've sung anything you would call medieval, but Renaissance, yeah, which is what the madrigals are. They're a style of Renaissance music, very similar to caroling, right? And I just kind of tripped over this morning, actually. One of the bands that I have always liked. They've never been my favorite, but they wrote. Well, they didn't write. Well, yeah, they did, but not at the beginning. They did a lot of very popular songs. It was the Grassroots, and they were kind of a psychedelic bubblegum, starting in the mid '60s, and in that time period there. While the American music scene was struggling with the British invasion, that there was this scene, really. I mean, it was mostly, San Francisco and Los Angeles. I think New York was more devastated by the British invasion. But the only real answer to the Beatles was coming out of the Byrds, as far as it went, as far as the music that we would send back overseas to them went. And so that was probably really frustrating for a lot of people in the music business. But in America, we still had Elvis was vital as an artist. He wasn't as just insanely popular as he was, but he was still pretty big. And you had bands like Blood, Sweat and Tears, and these Chicago, '68 I think it was. But the horn bands, and you had these really vibrant cross currents that were brewing in America that eventually in the 70s would break into several different categories of music, and then we would never again see quite the underground scene that we did in the 60s, and really up until about 74, and that's about when it pretty much blown up, and you ended up with the AOR format. And that ended the underground. But the underground was very interesting because you had just everything. R&B, Sly Stone was just incredible. You had just all these, James Brown, just all these rhythm and blues, black artists, Jimi Hendrix, translating it into kind of a proto-metal. And Clapton was doing the Cream thing with again a type of proto metal, psychedelic hard rock, and the techno and the metal and the punk and all these kind of came out of this swirling mixture of music, and eventually urban music broke away totally, and you really didn't hear really so much black music anymore on the white AOR stations, nor did you hear very many white artists on the black urban stations, which was a shame. It was a division that I think has had terrible consequences for music, not to mention our society itself. But I think that cross-pollination that was going on before was really very healthy. And not only that, it wasn't so much that you were listening to something because of the category. Because the category was kind of a makeshift. They often didn't know where to put these guys. But the corporations, I think, won out in the end, and they kind of swept away everything. They kind of put it in a post. I would say it this way: kind of a post Woodstock handcuff, that they wouldn't let people out of. They would put you here, and they would put you here, and they put you here, and crossing over was rather hard. And when it did happen, it just really promoted a more bland sound than what was coming out before. Which I think is where we're at right now, and that's partly why rock is kind of moribund. Country is thriving, but it's really basically Hicks singing hard rock, and then they're not that I like real country music, but I really don't like listening to this adenoidal versions of Bad Company. I really don't care for it. It gets old fast. Some of it's really good. I mean, I'll say that. So there's a lot of vibrant music in country, but a lot of the new country is really not country. They need to go back to their basics. And then with the R&B and the hip hop and all that's just deteriorating altogether. And quite frankly, I'm thoroughly bored with what they're doing now. Really not a whole lot new anywhere, and everything's kind of degenerating. But the Grassroots were one of my favorite bands in the early 70s. When I was a little kid. I wasn't very old. And I started going through puberty around then. Right, 72, 71, 72, 73, right in there. And I listened to a lot of pop radio, actually, because what was on the top of the pops was actually pretty darn good for the most part. I mean, there was some crap. I mean, there always is. A certain amount of fluff. But even some of the fluff, you kind of examine it a little bit more, and some of it turns out to be a little more substantial than you thought at first glance. And with the Grassroots, one of the things about them was that they were nice, compact songs. They were, for the most part, a kind of a light psychedelic. They weren't a heavier sound like you got with Iron Butterfly or something, but they made very tasteful music. And one of the things one of the reasons why I kind of tripped up over this, the Wrecking Crew, the collection of sidemen that they were calling into Los Angeles and Muscle Shoals, for the most part, they were just on hit after hit after hit, and they made the wall of sound for what's his name? Not important, but yeah, his wall of sound, the R&B girl group thing with just the very impressive wall of sound, and they worked with Ike and Tina Turner too. What the hell was his name? Oh goodness, he used to beat up on that one singer he was married to. Yeah, oh well. But anyway, the thing is that the Wrecking Crew included Glenn Campbell. Glenn Campbell was one of the key people in it. And there was a lot of others. I mean, Dr. John was in there, and so was Leon Russell. There were several other people that would become very well known. Jen Keltner would be one of the later ones, and they recorded so many great songs, and they were called in to cover for a band, and they would play the instruments while the band couldn't sing, and they would sing over top of them. That was one of the things with the Grassroots. They were one of these bands that they would call the wrecking crew in. They would do the whole thing up, put horns in it and stuff. I mean, it was the big production. I mean, that was why you called these guys. And they would record the song, and the guys would come in and sing it, and that was that. And so it was with Glenn Campbell passing, that this is something that a lot of people and I were talking about, and I mentioned some other things, with Campbell posting online, but I came across this really odd set of things here, and I'm going to pass this on to you. And this is the Grassroots, and this thing here I'm going to play is a song by a fellow named Rob Grill, who was he was the longest performing member of the Grassroots, and he's dead now. He died in 2011. But he recorded one single solo album, and it's actually quite good. And I'm going to play a little bit for you. I won't play the whole thing, but I'm going to get a kind of a taste for this because, I think it's quite excellent. So here you go. I'm going to hopefully YouTube kicks right in. And come on. Spinning eyeball of death. No, there we go.
Rock sugar, this is it. The tiny dancer. Yeah. Moving right through the night. Spin. A little mama. She's a tiny daughter. Yeah. Making it look so nice. Little lady, sugar lady, how come you look so sweet? You seem to be everything I need. Rock sugar, that's your blues and way. Rock sugar, take it away. Slow moving, yeah, slow grooving. Never holds back at all. And you're a dancer. You're born to be there. Dancing across the floor. Little lady, sugar lady, how come you look so sweet? You seem to be everything I need. Rock sugar, you're dancing through the night. Rock sugar, don't you make it seem so right? Make it seem so. Rock sugar, that's your blues and way. Yeah, rock sugar, take it away. Take it away. I wish you'd stop avoiding me. Every time I try to talk with you, our dancing's got to be the key. Hey,
Okay, I wanted to give you a taste of that, and I think if you listen to it yourself, or it's called Rock Sugar. It's by Rob Grill. Now, the thing about this song, well, it's going to take a little while to get to it. But, there we go. Starts with the grassroots. Now the problem with the grassroots is it wasn't a real clean beginning. What had happened there is really convoluted, and I say it right here. The grassroots story is convoluted one going out the gate. The band was not a band to begin with. It was not a band to begin with. It started as a song. Written by producer-songwriter duo P.F. Sloan and Steve Barry. And at the time, the pair worked for ABC Dunhill Records. Their biggest songs were Eve of Destruction by Barry McGuire, You Baby by the Turtles, Secret Agent Man by Johnny Rivers, and A Must to Avoid by Herman's Hermits. So these guys aren't too shabby, they're pretty decent songwriters. They wrote a lot of others. I mean, this doesn't do them total justice here. It really doesn't. They needed a band to do the song, and the original recording was Sloan with a few members of the Wrecking Crew of Where Were You When You Needed Me? That's the name of the song, Where Were You When You Needed Me? And the name for the band was Grassroots, right? Kind of obvious, right? And so the Grassroots were launched as basically a band with a record without a band. I mean, how else can you describe them? I mean, that's what they were. They were a band with a record without a band. They didn't exist, right? So, and this was 1965, right? This is really going back. First Beatles albums, right? And them coming to the U.S. When was that? 64, I think. 63 or 2. But early in the 60s. Any rate, they finally found a band featuring a lead vocalist, Willie Fulton, who would later end up in an early version of the Tower of Power. Very good band. What is hip? Great song, but great horn players. Fantastic horns. Good R&B. Nice group. I always like them. When Fulton and company pushed for greater autonomy in songwriting and their accustomed blues rock style, they were more of a blues rock band, right? When they were hired, they were fired. They just told them go away. Although they had a hit with their re-recording of "Where Were You When I Needed You," and they had even recorded a cover of Bob Dylan's "Mr. Jones' Ballad of a Thin Man" with Dylan's blessing. I think it was Sloan kind of worked out the deal there with Dylan personally. And he gave him the blessing of doing a recording of it. The band was even backing the Mamas and Papas and Barry McGuire on the road, and they were a Hollywood house band. And these guys were starting to go somewhere, and then they're like, hey, let us write some of our own tunes. We're a pretty good blues band, right? And they're saying, no. No, you don't have the rights to the name. And you don't have the rights to the song either. Bye. And they kicked them out. They just told them to get lost. This kind of thing happened all the time in the 60s and 70s. The Electric Prunes were screwed this way. But anyway, it goes on. There was a second band. A second band was given the name and re-recorded Where Were You? Blah, blah, blah. Ended up in the top 40 in 1966. Again, a second recording of the same song. Ended up in the top 40 a second time in 1966, same year, or actually a year later. And this group totally nameless. Nobody even knows who they are. I couldn't find anything. And they're gone too. No reason I could find. If I find one later on, I might do an update. But or if anybody knows, what about this second group that was the Grassroots, or any more about the first group? I'd love to find out. This is really fascinating. But yeah, they took it away from them too, even though they had a hit. They had a hit going, so something happened. I won't pretend to know. I can't find anything. And then there's a third group. No kidding. Named the Robs, and I read they're Jingly Jangly Birds Influenced Bubblegum Group. Which really kind of tells you where they were at the time. This is 1966 still now, and they were on the verge. They came pretty close, and they turned them down. This band would hover just under the top Billboard Hot 100, and would eventually become a country rock group called Cherokee, and break up sometime. Well, they didn't really break up. It's a little more complex than that, but they kind of faded away in the mid '70s. Now, as the Robs, they would become the replacement for Paul Revere and the Raiders, as the house band for Dick Clark's show Where the Action Is. And it's true. It's a lot of the songs, they were featured on the show, and pretty good. I mean, they weren't Tommy Rowe, which oh goodness, there's so many of those old bubblegum, 1919 fruit or 1910 fruit gum company, but they were too bad, and they weren't too bad. It was kind of jingly jangly pop, I mean, put a little edge on it, and you could hear maybe say what's his name, Tom Petty, might do it, I mean, which and I love that bird sound. I mean, that's something I like. I enjoy listening to, and I wouldn't mind playing a little bit. I like the old birds, and I'm learning much better to like the later incarnations. I'm really sinking my teeth into them lately, especially the Clarence White recordings. Just fabulous guitar work, just fabulous. But at any rate, the Robs were the replacements for Paul Revere and the Raiders on Where the Action Is, and these guys actually would end up running a highly successful recording studio, and among other people that recorded with them were Jane's Addiction, Aerosmith, Public Enemy, Lenny Kravitz, John Cougar. I never. There's an incredible list of stuff these guys had credits for in their studio, and their drummer, I think he passed away, but they all did side work, and the drummer actually was used on Betty Davis Eyes, which just incredible song. The guy, they were all talented. It's not like they were that bad. And I listened to some of Cherokee, and they were another group that they bubbled under, and they made the bubbling under the top 100 listings for Billboard several times. In fact, they were one of the bands that hit most often in that area without ever breaking into the top 100, which just remarkably bad luck, really. They had local hits all over the country, but they just couldn't put together anything nationally. So that was the issue there. But these guys turned down the offer to become the new Grassroots. In which case, they would have probably been more of a country act, and might have been more Eaglesy in the long run. The third band to end up with the name of the Grassroots was originally signed to ABC Dunhill as the 13th Floor. Not to be confused with the 13th Floor Elevators. I think that was the guy from ZZ Top's first band, I think. Or was it Chocolate Watch Band? I don't know. I'd have to look it up. But the 13th Floor Elevators is quite a different story. This says here their bassist was drafted, and they would choose Rob Grill as their new bassist. So what they did is they went down to the Union Hall, and they looked at the different bassists that were down there and checked their profiles and looked at their pictures, profiles, and stuff. And they liked the way he looked. They tried him out, and they liked the way he sounded. He sang really well, and they're like, "You're in." And he ended up singing a lot of leads for them. So at any rate, but they chose him from going down the hall. There you go. I used to be a laborer. People used to sit down the hall and wait till somebody called them in. Other members were guitarist Creed Bratton, who would find later fame with the TV show The Office, playing himself, but he was one of the original members. Drummer Rick Koontz, whose chops are still being ripped off by aspiring young drummers. He's one of these guys who's like a primeval rock drum influence. Just like you look at Ringo Starr. This is his style was very well honed and very very good, and very basic, and a lot of drummers have borrowed from him. He learned a lot from the guys that came in to actually play when he was sitting on his butt, because they called in the Wrecking Crew, and he learned off these Wrecking Crew guys all kinds of little tricks. So a lot of their album cuts and stuff, these are things that people listen to today, and they go, wow, he was really good, and they borrow from him. So Rick Koontz, keyboardist, guitarist Warren Entner, who went to school with the Doors' Jim Morrison and Ray Manzarek, and he went abroad and he met I guess it was Bratton, and they came back home. Well, they didn't come back home, but they met back in California, and they decided to put something together. And but Entner, keyboard, guitar. He also after he retired from the Grassroots, became a very successful promoter and worked with people like Rage Against the Machine. He was their manager. He managed them, and oh goodness, there was a whole bunch of punk and heavy metal groups mostly. He didn't play around with the lightweights, but at any rate, all members sang. Everybody was a singer. Lead vocals were mostly split between Entner and Grill, who wrote much of the material. Much of the B-sides, that's what they wrote. They weren't allowed to write most of the other, although there were a couple. They opted to take the name of the Grassroots, and first song they were given was "Let's Live for Today" to record. Just in time for the Summer of Love. Went over big time. It really matched the attitude of the time. Plus, they had the earlier recordings. They re-recorded them. And they did another recording of "Where Were You" with Grill singing, and the rest is history. And Grill was quite a singer. He was a good vocalist. However, the hits were almost all provided by outside songwriters. Almost all. There were a few that weren't, that they themselves wrote, but they wrote a lot of B-sides. And the albums, were filled with their songs, and they were actually quite good. Strong albums, actually. Studio musicians, particularly the members of the Wrecking Crew, were brought into play the instrumentation of potential hits, even though the members were fairly proficient instrumentalists, proficient musicians, excuse me. In fact, this would lead directly to the eventual firing of Creed Bratton in April 1969 after Bratton showed up at the Fillmore East drunk. And they say mildly inebriated, and you can tell that's not what it's meant. He was replaced by Dennis Provisor on keyboards and lead guitarist Terry Furlong. Tells you how good he was, actually. Provisor would prove to be an excellent songwriter, and he would actually write hits for the Grassroots. And I don't think any of the others did, but I know for a fact that he did a few of them. In fact, these two, Glory Bound and Two Divided by Love, were among his efforts, and wonderful songs. Just really, really good tunes. He also, as a vocalist, provided a little bit more of a soulful influence, where he was doing a counterpunch to the rest of the chorus, which is one of the things that he did. Now, Entner, he was famous for the 1, 2, 3, 4, la 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 la. So at any rate, can't help myself. At any rate, the band would have a number of personnel changes after 1972, and that's kind of when they stopped becoming being a big hit maker. They ended up with some problems with ABC is on their contract. Things like that. So 72 was kind of a year things started coming apart for the group, at least the main group, the biggest part of them. In the end, in 1977, Provisor and Grill would be the only two left. They stopped touring, but Grill continued to book a band using the name. But none of them had been with any previous incarnation of the group. So basically what he was doing is he was milking the oldie shows for, putting out a band called the Grassroots, and nobody from the band was in it. Now, he and Provisor, he had the name. Provisor and he were pals right up to the day that Grill died. And Provisor's still going. And he's a very, very fine writer. He wrote quite a few songs for other people. A couple of them for Rare Earth, actually. And any rate, but they stopped touring, and they were using the name. They're probably making a little money off of being the management. That's what he was probably doing. Even so, some of the musicians would be in the pool of personnel that would crop up in later, more legitimate incarnations of the group. And so it wasn't like they were all a bunch of, phonies. I mean, it was actually he was putting out a decent band. It was just that he wasn't in it anymore, and he was sitting on the side. Every once in a while, he'd like show up. He and Provisor both sometimes would show up and sit in with the band and get down and play a little bit. But they, like I said, he held on to the name. In 1978, Provisor and Grill would put together the Grassroots collection, 14 Great Ones. That was re-recordings of their hits, and Grill and Provisor were redoing it with other musicians they brought in. I remember not being real happy about that. I thought that was kind of a rip-off in a way, but I suppose looking back at it, it was a way of actually hearing how they might have heard the songs again. So I don't have as bad an attitude about it. I need to go back and listen to that one again, just to hear it. Grill decided to embark upon a solo career, and that's where we come to this song. He and Provisor would go into the studio for Grill's only solo album, Uprooted. And that's the name of the album. And I've listened to it. Actually, I hadn't heard it before. So I sat down and listened to it today, or most of it. And it's actually pretty good. It's It's 1979. Very probably overproduced a little bit, but it's well done. And let me give you a couple things here before I go too far. Provisor would write 4 songs for this album, including Rock Sugar, which you heard a little bit of, which is this song. He would also provide vocals and keyboard work for his friend here in that song, and for 3 other songs on the album. But he wrote that one. Lindsey Buckingham, John McVie, and Mick Fleetwood, of the most famous incarnation of Fleetwood Mac, played on the album. There's the rub. 3 members of Fleetwood Mac right there. And you could hear the guitar work of Lindsey Buckingham very clearly. It was just ripping. Actually, some fine work by Mr. Buckingham, who can be a very fine guitar player. I won't take away from him. And McVie got some production credits on the album. Grill and a touring band would open for Fleetwood Mac over 1970 and 1980 during the Tusk tour. Okay, and that was kind of when they kind of fell apart with Coke, really. But he was on the road with them at that time, and he was opening. Had his touring band there. At the end of the tour in 1980, Grill and Provisor put together a new incarnation of the Grassroots. And actually, I caught them in Chicago. They would play down there. In fact, I caught them about every year for several years. They played down here in Springfield as well. So Grill and Provisor were in a 1980 band. In 1981, Grill and Provisor would be joined by their old drummer, Koontz. I could be wrong, but I think it was after 1982 that the band would be called the Grassroots, starring Bob Grill. I don't think they started before that, if I remember correctly. They what they were doing was that after Provisor, who lives in Wisconsin, and he plays Chicago and stuff, but he doesn't go very far. He decided that he wanted to raise his family and stuff, so he quit touring altogether, and he just pretty much stayed home. And Koontz also retired. He would die in 2011. And I think his health started going bad earlier than that. But at any rate, after that, Grill put together a band. And I think that's when he started adding his name to the Grassroots to emphasize that he is in it. I don't think they did that before. Now I could be wrong, and if somebody could show me proof that otherwise, I'll mention that. I don't have a problem with that, because I'm not saying this because I think that I'm right and the other sources online are wrong. It's just that my memory of watching the band, I think that's what happened here. And like I say, I'll listen to anybody who says otherwise. But at any rate, this new band that he put together in 1982 did an album of new material. I shouldn't say all original. That would be kind of a misnomer, really. But they did put together an album of new material, and it was pretty good, actually. The Powers of Darkness was one of the songs on it. I think they had 3 singles, and they didn't quite break the charts, but it was good music. Actually, the band was the sound was a little different by then. They had become more of a hard rock outfit than an old 60s psychedelic pop. They were more hard rock oriented, which happens. The change of times was probably quite significant. They weren't more the pop, like the Fleetwood Mac of that time period. They were more of a They were more of a hard rock, and they had some wonderful keyboard work. He worked with some very good keyboard players, in those years afters, and the ones that he had in the early '80s when I was living in the Chicago area from '80 to '84. Those guys were good. They were really good players. In fact, one of the first people I ever saw use a PC hook up to his keyboard was one of his players, one of his keyboardists. And I don't think it was Provisor. I think it was somebody later. I think it was '82 or later. So, at any rate, but that's that. Kuntz and Grill died in 2011, and after Grill's passing, the band that goes by the name of the Grassroots is only post-Grill musicians. These guys, there were a couple of them that worked with him. In fact, I think all four of them worked with him, even the bass player that's with them now. I might be wrong on that. But I do know that the oldest pedigree goes back to '84. And that's a guitar player and keyboardist. And that might be that guy. I don't know. But they've been in and out of the band a couple times too. They're fine musicians, but without Grill in it, I really don't really have a whole lot of interest in seeing him play, to be really honest. He's a very fine singer, and one of those tragedies that kind of broke my heart, because I kept up with them. They would play a lot of small festivals and state fairs and county fairs and things of that sort for years, and it was cool. It was like I'd just check them out, see how they were sounding now, what kind of changes went on, and the great harmonies, great songs. I mean, Live for Today, and Midnight Confessions, they're just beautiful songs, beautiful, and you can play them with a nice hard rock edge. They really do have a nice sound. They are rock. They're not just pop. Now, one of the people that used to sub for Grill when he was sick, and from time to time, and he became actually an honorary member of the band, was a fellow named Sonny Geraci. And now he this gets more into the Cleveland scene, and that's where you get into like Donnie Iris and the Jaggers and all that kind of stuff, and the kind of hard rock meets R&B kind of scene, with Wild Cherry that these guys fostered there, and not only that, and some way provided the place for Perry Ubu to arise, and for that matter, Devo, this whole Cleveland thing, and Geraci was really important to that scene, and he was a good friend of Grill's, and he would fill in for him once in a while. Now the thing about him, he was in two bands in particular that are worthy of note. One of them was the Outsiders, and they had a string of hits. The main one was "Time Won't Let Me." I can't wait forever. Da, 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 da. Yeah, right, that thing, and the kind of R&B meets rock there. They got the horns and the whole thing going. They had a song that they did. One of their hits was "Help Me Girl," which isn't as familiar. But Chuck Mangione, the trumpet player, famous trumpet player, arranged the horns, I'm sure, but probably the whole song. But his biggest hit was a song in 1972 called "Precious and Few." And that was with a band called Climax. And they, cheesy pop. Well, if you listen to the rest of what Climax was doing, it was possible that with just a couple breaks, they could have gone somewhere and actually done something. They were kind of a wide-eyed soul band, actually, when you really got down to it. Precious and Few was a very light R&B, but you listen to the rest of the album and you hear a lot. It's a lot of string arrangements and stuff like that. But it did have some relations to what was going on in Philly and and really some other R&B markets that were going on at the time, and it was a little bit cheesy, but at the same time, you can actually get used to it. And that's the kind of sound that he was actually going for, and he could have very possibly have made it with a couple breaks. A lot of experts, a lot of people go back and look at these older artist stuff. I should say. I shouldn't say experts, but speculators, and I'll speculate with them. I think he could have. There was a market for what he was doing. It was just that he wasn't. They didn't pursue it. I didn't know that he was a member of both groups until I don't know, just a few years ago. I was just digging around in YouTube videos and I just happened to stumble across it. It's like, wow, he was a decent singer. What happened to him? Sonny Geraci, and then it's like, holy cow! Yeah, you mean he did that? Good grief! My problem was 75 and 6, and in 75 it was called Precious and Few, That was the title for it. It was that big of a silly hit, but it was a romantic song, and still a beautiful tune. I won't detract from it. Cheese or no cheese, I sometimes that cheese and the schmaltz is just fine. In fact, I kind of like a little schmaltz once in a while, and he did a beautiful job on that song. And some of the others, like I say, give it a little bit of listening, and I'd say you probably get used to it pretty easily. It's really not that bad. And he's a fine singer. And he died earlier this year. I don't know what happened. He had some health problems, brain aneurysm. So. Another death there. So sad to say. 69 years old. But any rate, that's kind of a little dip into some musicology. It can be fun. I do enjoy going on some investigations into music and the musicians and the things that happen. I am not a big celebrity person. I rather often laugh at these guys. But then I have my heroes, and I have my questions too. There's something that I'm going to bring up very soon, and it should be kind of a fun thing to go into, dealing with the original Fleetwood Mac with Peter Green. And my research on that has come along pretty good, although I'm going to tell you right now, it's a mystery. So that'll be coming, I don't know, in a week or two or a matter of days. We'll see what happens. But soon. Until then, later.